welcome everyone. When we get started, you all were kind enough to arrive here promptly. So, and welcome Deb and Nancy on Zoom, our Zoomers, our Zoomies. Thank you very, very much. I just want to thank Hal for kicking off this series. I've been meaning to ask, and I loved Hal's really dialing into the question, where are you from, and the connection to that overarching piece. In fact, my husband and I just got back from what we call a friendship tour. So we were down in Florida for a week. Another term that we learned was the Mooch March. So we were with 3 different friend couples, visiting with them, and where were you from and where are you coming, where are you coming from was such a good way to get us really into these relationships. And I will circle back in around that. So in week 2, as you can see from the handout, we're focusing in on the question, where does it hurt? And basically what this means, how can we show up for one another in ways that both explicitly show that we see the pain of the moment, and also that we are not afraid to sit with someone in pain. So as we begin, I'd like to offer up a prayer for us this morning. Can you hear me on Zoom okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dear Lord, thank you for this day and the time we have together in our beautiful church community, a place where we come to pursue you, to talk to you, and to help us want what you want for us. Our church is a holy place. It is also a place where we seek safety. Lord, nothing seems to make sense in our world right now. Our world feels neither holy or safe, especially as we witness the horrific events unfold in the Ukraine. C.S. Lewis reminds us that human life has always lived on the precipice. We pray this morning that you will help remove our fears or any other barriers that keep us from loving, following, and serving you. Lord, you are my only safe place. You are my shepherd, and may our time together help us feel your lavish love and direction for our lives, even just for today. Amen. So I'm going to ask if Phil wouldn't mind reading a poem from Reverend Sarah R. Is that how you pronounce it, Gerald? That tees it up from a creative side in terms of our subject matter. And as Hal and Gerald mentioned in the curriculum, this curriculum is really built not only on scripture, but how we can see God in art forms, but in poetry. So I'm going to offer this poem and invite Bill to read it.
Okay. You're about to hear a poem. When it hurts. I can tell that you're hurting. It's the way your eyes cast down, the way you shuffle through the house, distractedly bumping into things. It's the restless sleep and the quiet space between us, which turns us into icebergs. We float by, silent in night, most everything existing under the surface. I can tell that you're hurting. It's the way your prayers were quick at first and then none at all. Your silence challenging God, daring God to say something to the void. I can tell that you're hurting, but I don't know what that feels like. Tell me, where does it hurt? I'm not offering to fix the pain. I'm not that powerful. However, I am offering to see it, Show me your scars, and I'll show you that you're not alone. Poem by Reverend Sarah R.
Thank you, Bill. Beautifully read. And we're going to consider the message in that poem with these conversation prompts. So on your handout, there are 7 different questions. And I'd like you to turn to a neighbor. Maybe you can get the 4 of you, and then maybe the 3 of you and the 3 of you, to take a look at these questions. Introduce yourself and take a look at these questions, and which of these questions speak to you. Which are ones that either you struggle with, or that help you with this whole concept of where does it hurt. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk in your groups. Okay. How about you all? What stood out for your conversation? And let me back up. You know, when Gerald, to be honest, when Gerald shared this curriculum, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so great. That we can come to our church community. I mean, this is a reminder of how beautiful our church community and how safe it is. We do not have to come here and worship and be bulletproof. You know, how many church communities you show up in, and, you know, what's the expression, the frozen chosen, but that we can be absolutely real. I'll never forget sending Penn an email 2 weeks before our daughter and son-in-law were to get married here. They were out with their best friends. They went home. The other couple got in a terrible car accident, and she was killed. And so how do we go forward? How does my daughter go forward with this wedding with her best friend? And the circumstances, there was some unfortunate, very difficult shenanigans involved. So, and Penn and others just came to our side, and it was a very, very awkward and difficult scenario. So what were some of the things that struck out for you? What was it like for you to share, Steve?
Well, we unloaded on Nancy and Hal. I mean, this is very personal at this church for us. Gerald knows. We lost our grandson Davis 3 years ago, who was a member of this congregation, a member of the congregation, although he hadn't been through confirmation class yet. And I would just say that we were embraced by this congregation. We didn't live here then, we didn't know. We were embraced by this congregation in an overwhelming way that was just, it's hard to describe, honestly. There were multiple pieces to it, multiple people involved in it. The afternoon that Davis died, suddenly Will and Trevor were at our son Christian's home almost immediately, and it proceeded from there. Well, was Catherine there? She, I don't even remember. It was a blur for us, and yet it was. We've talked about that, and I'm going to be quiet in a moment, but talked about frequently in the last couple of years, how would we have gotten through that time without the support that many people have been cheated out of in the last 2 years? I don't know if we could have, honestly. It was a terribly overwhelming experience, but it was it helped us into the grieving process to receive the support of this congregation. I told Nancy and Hal that, I see faces when we're here now from that experience, and they don't know me and I don't know them, and yet I know those people were part of supporting us through that awful time of grief. And it's enough out of me.
Really witnessed it.
It's out of us.
Yes, yeah, and then the power of,
People
just
being there.
being there. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Absolutely.
being with us, supporting us in ways that they knew how to support.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Beautiful. I'm going to move over into a scripture, and I'm going to ask my my boyfriend over here if he wouldn't mind reading to us from Samuel and another angle on where does it hurt. So if you'll read 1 Samuel 1:1-18, please.
Okay. Hannah pours out her heart to God. There was once a man who lived in Ramathaim. He was descended from the old Zup family in the Ephraim hills. His name was Elkanah. He was connected with the Zups of Ephraim through his father Jeraham. Thanks, Joan.
Keep going.
His grandfather Elihu and his great-grandfather Tohu. They had two wives. And the first was Hannah, and the second was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, Hannah did not. Every year this man went from his hometown to Shiloh to worship and offer sacrifice to God of the angels' armies. Eli and his two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, served as priests of God there. When Elkanah sacrificed, he passed helpings from the sacrificial meal around to his wife Phinehas and all her children. But he always gave especially generous helping to Hannah because he loved her so much and because God had not given her children. But her rival wife taunted her cruelly, rubbing it in and never letting her forget that God had not given her children. This went on year after year. And every time she went to the sanctuary of God, she could expect to be taunted. Hannah was reduced to tears and had no appetite. Her husband, Elkanah, said, "Oh, Hannah, why are you crying? Why aren't you eating? And why are you so upset? Am I not more worth to you than 10 sons?" So Hannah ate, and then she pulled herself together and slipped away quietly and entered the sanctuary. The priest Eli was on duty at the entrance of God's temple in the customary seat. Crushed in soul, Hannah prayed to God and cried inconsolably. Then she made a vow. "O God of the angels of armies, if you will take good, hard look at my pain, if you will quit neglecting me and go into action for me by giving me a son, I'll give him completely, unreservedly to you. I'll set him apart for a life of holy discipline." And so it happened that she continued to pray before God. Eli was watching her closely. Hannah was praying in her heart silently. Her lips moved, but no sound was heard. Eli jumped to the conclusion that she was drunk. He approached her and said, "You're drunk. How long do you plan to keep this up? Sober up, woman." And Hannah said, "Oh, no, sir, please. I'm a woman brokenhearted. I haven't been drinking, not a drop of wine or beer. The only thing I've been pouring out is my heart, pouring it out to God. Don't for a minute think that I'm a bad woman. It's because I'm so desperately unhappy, in such pain that I've stayed here so long." Eli answered her, "Go in peace. and may God of Israel give you what you have asked of him. Think well of me and pray for me, she said, and she went on her way and then ate heartily, her face radiant.
Thank you. Thank you for your reading of that. And we know how the story plays out. And here are some questions. So let's start with the first one. Questioning and diminishing Hannah, Elkanah says, "Why are you so sad? Aren't I worth more than 10 sons?" Let's ask ourselves, have we ever centered ourselves in the story of someone else's pain? Or has anyone ever done that to you?
I think I could say yes and yes to both of those questions, but I think the hard thing is always to see through someone else's eyes, because we only have our own experience. But I mean, that's what a hurtful question. Aren't I worth more than 10 sons? Well, no, I want a son. So that's the challenge, I think, in all of this, is to be able to see through someone else's eyes, to
Yeah.
put yourself in their position.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, and how she really struggled, and was visibly so broken by this. And yet Elkanah just didn't get it, to your point. Yeah. How about with the second one? Hannah prays persistently before God. Just look at your servant's pain and remember me. In what ways are we praying to be seen and remembered? Or in what ways are you suffering in silence? So let me ask our Zoomers, do you have a comment on that particular one?
Ask the question again.
Yes. In what ways are you praying to be seen and remembered? In what ways are you suffering silently? So in the story of Hannah, I know for myself, suffering, is the Buddhists will tell us, suffering comes to us, and it's how do we make meaning out of the suffering? I have let all of my friend groups, my little female friend groups, know that I'm having surgery tomorrow. My husband, I got a wonderful email back. Well, we'll walk the dogs for you. And Maud said, well, it's not that big a deal, but I don't suffer in silence. I let people know when I am suffering. So, more than the average amount of people know that I'm having surgery tomorrow, because I'm nervous, I'm nervous.
Well, sometimes, what you're very aware that you're, in my case, suffering is not that important. And so you feel like I couldn't tell them that I'm worried about X, Y, Z, or this is terrible, because in the comparison to what other people are going through, it is really not a big deal. And so I would be probably less likely to mention that, just because,
Right.
and that's not a great thing, so that it builds up and then you're annoyed and hurt that people don't know that this is so important when you haven't told them.
Yeah.
So,
When you diminish your own, you downgrade your own suffering because it's also not a bad thing that you're aware of other suffering, but I think you diminish it and diminish your worth, which is what I appreciate the way you phrased the question. In what ways are you praying to be seen and remembered, that there is one who sees the suffering. And the praying piece is the connection piece.
And the scriptures talking about the husband who didn't understand, as well as the priest who was there and didn't understand. And yet she walks away radiant because she, in her prayers, had found God, that he does understand and is with her.
Yeah.
So that's part of the lesson.
Yeah. So God was, as he's responding as she is speaking in tongues, yeah.
So I grew up in probably like a lot of people where the culture was, and the family ethic was, if you suffer, keep it to yourself, buck up and, to make other people miserable by sharing your suffering.
Mhm. Yeah. Gerald, would you pull up the video? So now we're going to hear from Reverend Brittany Vickus von Rossum. Yeah, and so she is the author of this particular series. And so this is some of her thoughts on where does it hurt.
Hi, I am Brittany Christmas.
You know
I'm
what,
a pastor at Mercy.
you know what? I'm gonna have to do this a different way. I forgot that. Sound here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you move it?
around around the challenge of being fully present to others, people's pain without feeling the need to fix it.
That's my challenge. I hadn't figured out how to be comfortable being there. We were talking about sitting Sheba and just the physical
Sheba, yeah.
presence
Yeah.
of being there, and by that being there saying, you're important to me and I'm here for you, literally here for you. But it doesn't mean that I have to fix anything.
Yeah. Yep.
Or take on anything. It's just you matter enough to me for me to want to be here.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. A couple of times a month, I had the privilege as a volunteer to facilitate a caregivers support group for Alzheimer's and dementia patients. So the people that come to the support group are the caregivers. And all I'm doing is facilitating. And it's amazing. You introduce yourself, first name only. What is the prognosis of your person you're caregiving for, and what's the biggest challenge? We spend a full hour in just going around the room, and nothing is solved, but there is just such a sense of sharing experience, strength, and hope. And there's nothing sophisticated about the design. I just, send the Zoom out and, I go through the same 3 questions. And, I think to your point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to need to send some resources out. I'm going to pair you up and you ought to go and try this particular thing. That's not what they want. They just want to come to a safe place to hear, experience, strength, and hope. So what else? Others experience with this challenge of being fully present to the pain. I loved Reverend Brittany's example of checking in with a homeless friend and the challenge of asking about how the night went, and what might be behind that.
I think being present, from my experience, is just being there and not trying to say things that make it better, like, well, God needed another angel, or that really bothered me when our grandson died. I just needed them to be there and look, not even say anything, but just be present.
Mhm.
And sometimes there's a challenge for people as impatient as me, when obviously it's a lifelong wait and there's no timetable, but to realize and to be there, not just immediately after, but for the long haul, and be willing to hear and not, again and again.
I think sometimes you just have to accept that you can't fix it, and all that you can do is listen.
All of these examples of real hurt, you've given each of us a gift in sharing them with us as we are trying to discover ways in which we can count on God for being there, and for seeing this place as a safe and holy church community. So I think we have to wrap up. I want to point to you 2 additional resources. My boyfriend and I listened to Dr. Arthur Brooks, The Strength of the Second Half. And in there, in that YouTube, it's just a wonderful resource around how we can continue to grow in our life and pursuit of our relationship with God around real issues. I think one of the things that was so terrific about our friendship tour is every morning we would get up and have a coffee clutch with our friends and talk. And YouTube gave us some context, it's sort of like go deep or go home. How are you doing on the issue of, power, all those false idols that we can have. And it was just I strongly encourage you to check that one out. And then the other one is John Ortberg's piece on finding peace in the Ukraine and Russia conflict. Just want to thank you for coming today and for willing to, bring all of you.